The girl at the window. She never knocked, never called, never smiled, but every night for 6 nights, she stood outside his window. Derek Holt had lived in the same 2-bedroom rental outside Asheville, North Carolina for just under 5 months. The neighborhood was quiet, tree-lined, a little forgotten, the kind of place where mailboxes leaned slightly and porch lights flickered not from ghosts, but from cheap wiring. He worked night shifts, remote tech support for a logistics firm, mostly alone. Most nights the only sounds were wind brushing through pine trees, or the occasional raccoon rattling trash cans, until the girl showed up. It was a Monday, when he first noticed her. 2:17 a.m. He was sitting on his couch, laptop open, barely listening to the customer complaining about printer drivers. He turned toward the window, just to rest his eyes from the screen, and that's when he saw her. A teenage girl, thin, pale, wearing an oversized hoodie, with the hood pulled low, standing completely still on the edge of his lawn. Her face was half lit by the porch light. She wasn't moving, just watching. At first, Derek thought maybe she was lost, but when he stood and stepped toward the door, she took off, fast, into the trees behind the property. He opened the door, called out, but only the wind answered. Shrugging, he assumed it was some local teen pulling a prank. Kids in the area had done worse, but then she came back. The next night, and the night after that. By the 4th night, Derek stopped pretending it was nothing. He tried calling out again, tried taking photos, but every time he opened the door, she was already gone. That's when he started noticing things inside the house were different. A fork he never used, sitting in the sink. A mug, not his, drying on the counter. On the 5th morning, he found his front door slightly ajar. He was sure, absolutely sure, he had locked it before going to bed. He checked the footage from his door cam. Nothing. Just static, from 2:13 to 2:21 a.m., and when it resumed, the door was open. The 6th night, Derek stayed up, sat in the dark with his phone ready. No work, no distractions, just silence. 2:18 a.m. She appeared again, this time, closer, at the bottom of the front steps. Her hoodie had a strange pattern across the chest, like dried mud or paint. Her hands were tucked inside the sleeves. He snapped a picture. The flash lit her face. She didn't flinch. She didn't move. That's when he saw it clearly. Her lips weren't just closed, they were stitched shut, threaded crudely with something dark. Maybe twine. Her chin trembled slightly, but she didn't make a sound. Derek froze. His breath caught. His phone slipped from his hand and hit the floor with a soft thud. She turned and walked slowly around the side of the house. He didn't follow, not immediately. Instead, he backed into his bedroom, locked the door, and stared at the wall until sunrise. He didn't sleep. That morning, he called the sheriff's office. They sent a deputy, who politely listened and even took the phone with the blurry photo. But there was no report of a missing girl, no signs of forced entry, no one on the cameras. Again, static during the key hours. The deputy left with a shrug. Probably a drifter. Keep your doors locked. But Derek knew it was something else. That night, the air in his house felt heavy, like static before a thunderstorm. He bolted the doors, checked the windows, pushed furniture in front of the entryway. 2 a.m. He waited, knife in hand. But she didn't come to the window this time. She came to the mirror, in the hallway. Not a knock, not a creak, just her reflection. He passed the mirror on the way to the kitchen and saw her standing behind him, except she wasn't there, only in the reflection. The next morning, Derek didn't call the police. He called a realtor. Within 2 weeks, he moved out. A month later, he checked the property listing out of curiosity. It had already been rented. He clicked on the tenant review page. There was one new comment. Just one sentence. Does anyone else see her at 218? Exit 43. Adam Prescott was a traveling mechanic, a man of routines, grease-stained hands, and a no-nonsense schedule. He worked out of a van customized like a mobile workshop, tool drawers, jack lifts, and an emergency kit built for roadside breakdowns. He was headed west from Charleston to Knoxville, riding Interstate 40 late at night after finishing a last-minute call. It was nearly 1 a.m. The roads were empty. The radio crackled between static and the occasional country ballad. Somewhere past mile marker 232, Adam noticed his gaslight flicker on. He cursed under his breath. He'd passed the last open station 30 minutes ago. He reached for his phone, but the signal was gone. Dead zone. And then he saw it. Exit 43. A green reflective sign half hidden by a leaning pine tree. He didn't remember it being there. No lights, no town name, just a sharp right arrow, and the number, 43. Desperate and running on fumes, Adam turned. The off-ramp curved hard and long like a snake's body. The trees on both sides thickened. No lights, no buildings, just dark forest pressing in on either side. At the end of the ramp, he reached a narrow 2-lane road, and then a gas station. Run down. Faded signage. One pump. The kind of place that should have gone out of business in the 90s, but it was open. He pulled in, heart racing with relief. As he stepped out, he noticed another vehicle, an old black sedan, parked facing away from the building, engine running, headlights on. A man stood beside it, tall, wearing a long coat, just standing, as if waiting for someone. Adam nodded as he passed, but the man didn't move. He paid inside, cash only. The cashier was pale, sweaty, didn't speak, just rang him up and passed back the change without eye contact. As Adam returned to the pump, he noticed the man in the coat had turned, facing him, still unmoving, still silent. Adam filled up quickly and drove off. As soon as he pulled onto the dark road again, his rear-view mirror picked up movement. The black sedan, pulling out from the lot, turning in the same direction, following. He told himself it was just a coincidence, a local heading home. Nothing strange, but the car stayed behind him, exactly 2 car lengths. No matter how fast he went, no matter how slow, for 20 straight miles. The road was completely empty, except for that single pair of headlights. He tried pulling over. The sedan pulled over too. He tried turning down a side road. The sedan turned too. No honking, no aggression, just silent mimicry. At one point, Adam stopped in the middle of the road, stepped out of his van and shouted toward the sedan, "What the hell do you want?" The car stopped, lights still on, but the man didn't get out. Adam stared for almost a full minute, then got back into his van and drove. Eventually, the narrow road led back to the highway. Adam breathed a sigh of relief as the familiar signs of civilization returned. He merged into the right lane, heart still pounding. The sedan didn't follow. He checked the mirror again. It was gone. But when he reached a rest stop an hour later to collect himself, he glanced at the GPS. No sign of exit 43. No record of any gas station along that stretch. Nothing but forest and state land. Thinking it must have been a backwoods spot not on the map, Adam tried to sleep in the van for an hour before continuing home. But something was off. He dreamed of headlights, of the man in the coat, standing at the foot of his bed. The next morning, Adam reached his driveway around 9 a.m. His front door was ajar. Inside, nothing was stolen, nothing broken. But sitting in the center of his kitchen table was a gas receipt. Same station, same pump number. No name, just 2 printed words on the line where a signature should be. Exit 44. There is no exit 44. The boy with no name. He played with your son for 3 days straight. But when the vacation ended and you asked who he was, your son looked confused and said, "What boy?" In the fall of 2021, Sam and Olivia Calder took their 6-year-old son, Ethan, to a rustic family cabin outside of Lake Wallenpaupack, Pennsylvania. It was meant to be a digital detox. No phones, no tablets, no TV, just hikes, fresh air, and s'mores under the stars. The cabin sat at the edge of a quiet inlet, surrounded by pine woods. The nearest neighbors were a 5-minute walk down a gravel path. Their dog, Milo, loved it, chasing squirrels and rolling in the brush. For the first few days, everything went exactly as planned, until Ethan made a new friend. It started on the 3rd morning. Sam stepped out to check the propane tank and saw Ethan playing near the edge of the woods. He was running, laughing, hiding behind trees. "What are you up to, bud?" Sam called. "Playing tag with my friend," Ethan shouted, smiling. "He's really fast." Sam looked around but didn't see anyone else. "Your friend from where?" he asked, walking closer. But Ethan just giggled and ran deeper into the trees. That night, Olivia asked Ethan what his friend's name was. He paused, thoughtful, then shrugged. "He doesn't really have one," he said. "He said names are boring." At first, Sam and Olivia assumed it was an imaginary friend, harmless, common. But over the next 2 days, things got stranger. Ethan insisted on setting an extra plate at dinner. He whispered to someone behind closed doors. He left one side of the bed untouched, so the boy could sleep. When asked why the boy never came inside, Ethan said, "He doesn't like grown-ups. He says you wouldn't understand." Olivia brushed it off, until Milo, usually calm, began growling at the corners of rooms, barking at the front porch, refusing to go outside after dark. And then, the drawings started. Ethan always loved drawing, but the ones he made now were different. Charcoal sketches. A faceless child standing in the woods, long arms, no feet, no eyes. When Olivia asked what it was, Ethan replied, "That's my friend, but he doesn't like being seen. That's why I draw him from memory." Sam flipped through Ethan's notebook while he slept. Every page had the same boy, sometimes alone, sometimes holding Ethan's hand, sometimes standing right behind him. The last page showed the faceless boy standing in front of the cabin, his body blackened, stretching into smoke, blending into the trees. That night, just after 3 a.m., Sam heard footsteps upstairs. He rose, thinking Ethan was sleepwalking, but when he checked his son's room, Ethan was sound asleep. So was Olivia. The footsteps continued, slow, deliberate, across the floor above. Only, there was no second floor. He stood there, frozen, listening, until the noise stopped. When he turned to head back to bed, something caught his eye. On the living room window, a handprint, small, greasy, barely visible in the moonlight. But it wasn't on the outside. It was pressed from within. The next morning, Ethan was gone. His bed was empty, front door unlocked, dog whining near the fireplace. Panic erupted. Sam ran into the woods. Olivia called the local ranger station. Within an hour, search teams were combing the area. It wasn't until sunset that they found Ethan, curled up beneath a hollow tree, shivering but unharmed. When they asked him what happened, he just said, "We were playing hide and seek. I didn't know he'd go so far." That night, Olivia sat beside her son and asked him gently who the boy was. Ethan blinked. "What boy?" "The one you were playing with, the one who sleeps next to you." He stared at her, puzzled. "There's no boy, Mommy. I was just playing by myself." They chalked it up to stress, imagination, the woods. A week later, after returning home, Sam reviewed the old Polaroids they'd taken on the trip, smiling pictures of Ethan, the lake, the cabin, and then one image near the woods. Ethan, holding someone's hand, but no one was there. Just Ethan's arms stretched sideways, fingers curled gently around empty air, and behind him, in the shadows of the trees, A pale silhouette, too tall for a child, too thin for a man, and just faint enough to almost miss. Next up, a woman buys an antique mirror and finds a second version of herself already living inside it. The reflection room. Maya Walters had never been superstitious. She ran a small interior design studio in Portland, Oregon, specializing in rustic restorations, barn doors, old hardwoods, copper sinks. Her clients were mostly young couples, wanting homes that looked older than they were. That's how she ended up at the back of a dusty antique warehouse, just off I-84. She was there to source a farmhouse coffee table. Instead, she found a mirror, 7 feet tall, arched top, wood frame carved with strange knotwork that looked almost Celtic. Slow pause. She didn't want the glass, just the frame. She told the shopkeeper as much. He hesitated. "That mirror's never been moved from that spot," he said, scratching his neck. "Some say it doesn't like being seen in new places." She thought it was just sales banter. It wasn't. The mirror was delivered the next day. It was heavier than it looked. Her contractor struggled to carry it up the steps into the guest room of her cottage. She leaned it against the wall temporarily, draping a blanket over half the frame to see how it would look with a coat of whitewash. That night, as she passed the guest room on her way to bed, she caught something odd. A flicker of movement. Not in the room. In the mirror. She paused, backed up, looked into the glass. Everything was in place, but her own reflection stood slightly differently. Her arm, in the mirror, was down by her side. In real life, she was holding a cup of tea. She blinked. So did the reflection, but it was out of sync, just by a breath. She stared at it for a long minute, before shrugging it off. Sleep deprivation, she told herself. But over the next few days, the mirror got bolder. Sometimes she'd see her reflection step forward, while she remained still. Other times, when she entered the room, she'd find the mirror already filled, like it had been expecting her. She tried covering it completely with a sheet, but every morning, the sheet was on the floor. One night, just past 2 a.m., Maya awoke to a noise, a creak, then another. Footsteps, not heavy, but deliberate. She sat up in bed, heart pounding, and grabbed her phone for the flashlight. Her bedroom door was ajar. The guest room door, across the hall, was open. She stepped quietly across the hallway, the wooden floor cool beneath her feet. And there, in the guest room, the mirror stood uncovered. But the reflection wasn't hers. It was Maya, yes, but wrong. Her skin was a shade too pale, her eyes too wide, and she was smiling. Maya stumbled back, slamming the door shut, heart hammering. The next morning, she tried to convince herself it was sleepwalking, dream residue. But the footprints on the floor told a different story. Small, bare, mirrored her own. Only, she hadn't been in that room barefoot. She called a local moving company and asked them to come haul the mirror back to the warehouse. When the truck arrived, the glass was already cracked, 3 jagged fractures running down the middle. The mover asked if she wanted to keep the frame. She shook her head. That night, Maya felt lighter. She lit candles, watched a movie, even slept with the door open. But at 3:12 a.m., something woke her. Her phone buzzed, a text message from an unknown number. One word. "Miss me?" She opened the camera app. Nothing in the room. She angled it toward the window just for peace of mind. That's when she saw it. Not her reflection, not the glass, but a face, pressed just against the dark pane, watching, smiling. Her own face. Maya moved out 2 weeks later. She found an apartment in the city, no mirrors, none at all. But sometimes, and in shop windows or glass doors, she catches movement behind her. Her own shape, just not quite. Once in a cafe, she caught her reflection smiling before she did. And in that moment, she knew. The mirror had never been about the glass. It was about the opening, and some doors, once seen, stay open. Circles in the dirt. Landon Shaw wasn't the reckless type. He was the kind of solo traveler who triple-checked his gear, packed emergency beacons, and left detailed itineraries with friends. He'd hiked every trail in the Front Range, camped in Glacier, even summited Mount Whitney. So when he told people he was spending 5 days off-grid in the San Juan Mountains, no Wi-Fi, no roads, just untouched pine, no one blinked. He was experienced, careful, prepared. That's what made what happened so strange. Because for all his planning, there was nothing in his backpack that could explain what he saw on the third morning. He set up camp beside a glacial lake, about 10 miles from the nearest trailhead. Quiet, peaceful, high elevation, exactly what he needed. The first 2 days passed with gentle hikes, fresh trout, and long stretches of silence, broken only by wind and birds. Each night he hung his food, zipped himself into the tent, and fell asleep, to the sound of water lapping at the shore. On the third night, however, something shifted. Around 2 a.m., he awoke with the sense of being watched. Not a sound, not a shadow, just that instinctive chill that creeps up your spine when your body knows before your brain does. The next morning, Landon unzipped the tent, blinking against the sunlight, and froze. Footprints all around his tent, deep, precise, bare feet, human, but wrong. The spacing was uneven, toes too long, and they formed a perfect circle around his tent, each one pointed inward, toward him. No animal signs, no drag marks, just those barefoot prints. The ground around them was otherwise untouched. He took photos, measured one, nearly 13 inches. There were no prints leading away, just the circle. Landon spent the rest of the day pacing, scanning the woods, questioning his memory. He told himself he might have sleepwalked, but he knew better. He didn't sleepwalk. He never left the tent. That night, he armed himself, a knife, bear spray. He built a fire, closer than usual. He didn't sleep, and just before dawn, he heard it, breathing, not heavy, not close, but somewhere, in the trees, rhythmic, human, but no footsteps, no movement, just the sound of slow, wet breaths. When light broke through the trees, he stepped out again. Another circle, smaller, closer. This time, only 6 prints, but deeper, as if whoever, or whatever, had been leaning in. Landon packed his gear immediately. He had 3 days of supplies left, but he didn't care. As he hiked out, he kept looking over his shoulder. He never heard footsteps, but he saw movement in the corners of his eyes. Something pale, darting between trees, just out of focus. About 2 miles down the ridge, he stopped to drink from his canteen. That's when he noticed something. In the dirt beside the trail, another footprint. Not his, facing uphill, toward where he had just come from. He continued in silence, breath shallow, every sound amplified. When he finally reached the parking area that evening, his car was untouched, but someone had left something under his windshield wiper. A stone, perfectly round, carved with a spiral. It matched no tribe, no park symbol, nothing he recognized. He left it on the ground and drove back home. Landon filed a report with the Forest Service. They said it was likely teenagers playing games. But 2 days later, he woke to find mud tracks on his balcony. 3 prints, facing his bedroom window. Still no sign of entry. He installed cameras, bought a gun, never camped again. But even now, every once in a while, when he wakes in the middle of the night, for no reason, He finds his boots, moved just slightly, as if someone had been trying them on from the inside. If you made it this far, double-check your locks. And if you're planning a camping trip, maybe stay close to the main trail, because not every shadow in the trees was empty. The Guestbook. They checked in as husband and wife, but when the owner flipped open the Guestbook, she saw their names already written down, dated 2 years ago, with a big red X drawn through them. Jackson and Mireya Beck had only been married 5 days. Their honeymoon plans had started as a beach escape, but when Mireya surprised him with a private countryside detour in upstate Vermont, a weekend in a 19th century farmhouse BB, Jackson couldn't say no. The listing was quaint, handwritten notes from the host. No Wi-Fi, no modern distractions. Time slows down here, the listing promised, and some guests never want to leave. That line felt charming, until it didn't. The house stood on a ridge surrounded by old woods and fog-slicked fields, painted white. Wrap-around porch. It looked like it had stepped out of a faded postcard. Their host was a woman in her 60s, soft voice, wide smile. She wore a faded apron and smelled of cinnamon and dust. "Room 4, she said. "Upstairs on the left. Fireplace still works, but don't open the windows after sunset." Mireya laughed. "Why not?" The woman's smile didn't break. "Because what comes in, that doesn't always go back out." They thought she was being cute. She wasn't. After dinner, as they sat by the fire, Mireya noticed a leather-bound book on the mantel. "Guestbook," the host called from the kitchen. "Leave a note before you leave." Curious, Jackson flipped through the pages. Neat entries, date, names, comments, all warm, cheerful. Then, odd things started appearing. A scribbled line. "They watched us sleep." Another. "The mirrors don't show your real face after the second night." Then, near the back, an entry with both of their names. Jackson Mireya Beck, room 4. The handwriting, shaky. The ink, smudged. And beneath their names, a single large red X. The date, 2 years ago. They froze. "This is a mistake," Jackson said. "Someone must have had our names." But Mireya felt cold. No one spells Mireya like mine. No one. That night she awoke to knocking, not on the door, from inside the walls. It started in the corner, near the headboard, then the baseboard, then under the bed. Jackson heard it too. Thud, pause, thud, thud. They tore the sheets off, turned the lights on. Nothing. But in the morning, dust from the baseboard had spilled out, and behind the dresser, carved into the wall, were 3 initials, JMB. They packed up, hearts racing. When they rushed downstairs, the host was gone. No note, no goodbye. But the front door wouldn't open, not jammed, not locked, just sealed, no matter how hard Jackson pulled. They tried the windows, nailed shut. Mireya smashed a teacup, tried prying one open, bloodied her hand. Nothing. That night, they didn't sleep, because the knocking returned. Only this time. It wasn't in the walls. It was on the inside of the closet. And when Jackson opened it, there was nothing inside, except the same guestbook. Open. Flipped to the final page. A new entry, written in black ink. "We tried to leave, but they already wrote our names." Mireya tried the back stairs. Jackson searched for tools, but the house shifted. Doors led to hallways that hadn't been there the day before. Lights flickered, without bulbs. From upstairs came whispering, not angry, not pleading, just one repeated phrase, "Room 4 is always full." They broke a window, climbed onto the porch roof, jumped into the backyard. Their ankles twisted on landing, but they didn't stop running, through fields, over fences, until headlights blinded them. A passing driver picked them up just past 3 a.m. They didn't speak until they were halfway to town. They returned with police the next day. The house was there. Still, empty. No power, no furniture, no signs of habitation, no guest book. Room 4 had no bed, just dusty floorboards, and a single mirror leaning in the corner, one that showed Jackson's face, slightly behind his own, as if watching him. Mireya never spoke about it again. They burned the clothes they wore that night, but every year, on their anniversary, they each get an envelope in the mail, no return address, just a blank card, and a date, 2 years in the future. The next one reads, Room 4, Beck's returning. Room 6B is calling. The intercom crackled at 3:13 a.m. The voice said his name. But the classroom it came from had burned down 30 years ago. James Tuller didn't mind the graveyard shift. After retiring from a 20-year stint in city maintenance, he took a custodial job at Fairview High School just to keep busy. The school had history, built in the late 60s, renovated 4 times, and like most places built before air conditioning was standard, it made noises, pipes, vents, echoes. James got used to them quickly, but what he heard that October night wasn't a building settling. It was a voice, and it knew his name. It started as static. He was mopping the second-floor science wing when the overhead speaker popped and hissed, "Yeah, shh, James." He paused. He thought maybe the admin system was glitching, old wires maybe. He walked to the main office to check the PA console. Nothing was active, no buttons pressed, no lights blinking. The system was cold. Then it came again, louder, clearer. "James, 6B. There was no 6B. There hadn't been in decades. Room 6B was the old chemistry lab. It was sealed off in the late 80s after a fire. An accident that killed a student and left part of the East Wing unrepairable. The district never rebuilt it. They just blocked it off. Cinder blocks, no entry. James had passed that section dozens of times. It was just a charred hallway, ending in a steel fire door that no longer opened. But something about the voice. It wasn't a request. It was a summons. James took his flashlight and headed toward the blocked wing. As he approached, the temperature dropped, not like a breeze, like a basement freezer. The hallway's walls were covered in faded banners. One had burn marks along the edge. Another read, "Future scientists of Fairview, never forget." At the end of the hall, the fire door stood where it always had. Only now, it was slightly ajar. James pushed it open, slowly. The smell hit first, like melted plastic, and wet smoke. He stepped inside. The room beyond had no lights, just moonlight, leaking in through a shattered window, broken lab tables, soot-covered tiles, and a single chalkboard with writing on it. 3 words. "We hear you." Then the intercom crackled again, but not from the ceiling. This time, from inside the room. A small speaker in the corner buzzed alive. "James, look behind you." He turned. Nothing. Just the doorway, now closed, locked. He tried pushing it, slamming it. No give. Behind him, a shape moved through the moonlight, tall, thin, slow. James spun, flashlight shaking in his grip. There, standing by the window, was a boy in a burned school uniform, hair half melted, eyes white. He pointed to the chalkboard. New words had appeared. "Say it back." James couldn't speak. He stared, then whispered, "I hear you." The room trembled. Dust fell from the rafters. The intercom crackled violently. And then, silence. The door creaked open, by itself. When he stepped out, the hallway was normal. Lights on, air warm. It was as if the last 20 minutes had never happened. The next day, he asked the principal about the fire. She paused. "Why?" He explained what happened. She gave a nervous smile. "There's no intercom in that room," she said. That whole system was ripped out in '89. He showed her his flashlight. It was burnt along one side. She went pale. Later that week, James handed in his resignation, but not before leaving something behind. A sticky note on the old PA console. If it calls again, don't answer. If you're still here, maybe leave a light on tonight. Because sometimes, the scariest stories are the ones that call you by name. We have more original horror stories coming every week. Subscribe wanting to stay in the dark with us. And remember, some stories aren't meant to be shared, but we share them anyway.